membership.
Coming up on Chopper's Brexit podcast.
You know, since the post-war golden age, as it were, in the 1950s, this decline in party membership, because there's simply far more things that can capture the attention of people now than there were back then. I mean, we're used to the idea of the Young Conservatives back then being, you know, the best dating agency in town. Who needs the Young Conservatives to find someone to date nowadays?
You swipe left or swipe right.
Well,
as
swipe
the Tories
right,
will swipe right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello and welcome to Chopper's Brexit Podcast. I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph's chief political correspondent, and the last person left in Westminster over the summer recess. Apart from the staff at the Red Lion pub in Westminster, that is, who've just brought me my second Americano. But before we get on with the nuts and bolts of Brexit, there's just 77 days to go. A quick reminder that you can come and see us record a live podcast at Podcast Live in London on Saturday the 5th of October. We've done the event before and it's really great fun. Go to podcastlive.com for tickets and use the code CHOPPER10, that's CHOPPER 10 in capitals, to get 10% off your ticket price. Right, on with the show. I was speaking to Maddie Teamont-Jack from the civil service friendly Institute for Government on why Parliament cannot stop a no-deal Brexit, and the woman who founded the Brexit Party, Catherine Blaiklock, with some news of her own. As well as Professor Timbale, he'll be here to tell me about his new book about what political parties want from their members. But first, this week, John Bolton, a senior advisor to the US President Donald Trump, was in London, saying that the UK and US can sign smaller trade deals in double quick time. And with me now is one of the journalists who spent time with him during his trip, Daily Telegraph foreign correspondent Roland Oliphant. I'm joined now by the Telegraph's chief foreign correspondent, Roland Oliphant. Roland, welcome to the Red Lion pub. Your first time here?
It's an absolute honour.
You've been to drinking dens around the world, but have you ever been to the Red Lion pub?
Only for coffees early in the morning before meetings in Parliament.
Yeah. Now, you've been with John Bolton this week, the senior advisor to Donald Trump. He's been in London, and you met him. He is seen by many in the ERG as a friend of Britain. I mean, a friend in inverted commas. Did you find him friendly towards Britain's intentions post-Brexit?
He's very friendly to hard Brexiteer intentions post-Brexit.
Exactly.
That's for sure. I mean, he basically wrote, you could almost call it writing a blank cheque. It was kind of amazing to sit there next to him and hear him kind of run through this list of you know, not just Brexiteer talking points, hard Brexiteer talking points. You know, that the EU treats people like peasants and we're going to do everything to give you a trade deal, that you want.
He could have been Owen Paterson or Ian Duncan Smith, his two good friends, couldn't he?
Basically. You know, it was quite discombobulating to see. It was basically the Trump administration saying, like, everything you've said about America giving you a trade deal, about a hard Brexit being perfectly possible, all of that, I agree with it all. Bring it on.
To what extent should we be worried about this? You know, it's the fox with his mouth closed, I'm not going to eat you, come near me, that kind of thing.
I think we should be very careful about that, would be my insight. John Bolton is a guy who's, you know, he's known for one guiding principle, and that is the only thing that matters is American self-interest. And, you know, anybody who's done any kind of, we're not going to trade negotiation, I bring it down to like the first time you buy a house or renting off a landlord or anything, right? Negotiating a pay rise at work or something. It gets pretty nasty pretty quickly, right? And there are basic differences over things like, you know, the NHS, things like, you know, we all know about the chlorinated chicken thing, right? And we asked him about that and he goes, that's for the trade negotiators. Oh, somebody explained to me the NHS thing. I don't understand it and I don't see a problem. Come on. You know, this kind of thing.
All right for now, isn't it? But when we're in that room negotiating, it might be quite a different matter.
Exactly.
Were you concerned about what he said? I mean, he talked on the plus side, he talked about small trade deals, individual little ones to pick off the easy, low-hanging fruit. Is that a good idea?
It sounds logical, right? There's a question for, not really for me, for economics and trade experts, right? Because as I understand, that's something America's been very reluctant to do in the past.
Yes.
You know, and there seems to be some small print somewhere in WTO rules which say if you're going to have a goods agreement, it's got to be all goods. You can't package off your car industry or something like that. So there are legal questions. We ran this past a few people and no one's quite sure what the answer is because these promises are so vague.
And it's vague for a good reason. Any feeling for Boris Johnson from him? I mean, was he saying good things about Boris Johnson as well as Britain and post-Brexit Britain?
I think the most interesting thing is there's a clear frustration, or has been a clear frustration in Washington with Theresa May, partly because of her caution, things like that, because she adhered to orthodox British foreign policy positions, reluctant to align with America on things like this hardline policy against Iran, prepared to offer Huawei some access to Britain's 5G network, all to American irritation. He was pretty clear that he is hoping for, he said it's not going to be a quid pro quo, I'm not pressuring it, but he seems pretty confident that Boris Johnson is going to align Britain much more closely with America on those issues.
Do you worry from the meeting that we could become a satellite state for America post-Brexit if we to rely too heavily on this big new friend?
I think that is one of the big questions around Brexit, right? This idea that by aligning with the United States, that's going to solve all our problems and so on. I mean, I travel all around the world, right? And a lot of the people I meet all over the place have seen Europe as a mechanism for projecting British power, actually, a maximizer of British power. And let's go back to that analogy of, buying a house or asking for a pay rise at work or something, right? If you don't have someone else to go to, a way of walking away from that negotiation, you're in a much weaker position. So Britain's always been in that bind of prioritising the transatlantic relationship with America ever since 1945, and nothing can jeopardise that relationship. After Brexit, I think a lot of diplomats, if you talk to people at the Foreign Office, they won't go on the record, but will express that concern. Right, we're going to be much, much more reliant on America, and it's going to be much more difficult for us to resist them or to go our own way.
Extraordinary. Well, Roland Oliphant, thank you for coming on Chopper's Brexit Podcast. Will you come on again and have a drink?
I'd be delighted.
See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we're used to hearing about Conservative defections of the Brexit Party amongst Leavers who are desperate to make Brexit happen, but what we don't often hear is about defections the other way, about people leaving the Brexit Party to join the Tories. But one person who's done just that is Catherine Blaiklock, the founder of the Brexit Party. Now, Catherine resigned from the Brexit Party in March this year when racist remarks she put on Twitter were uncovered. And we'll be discussing those later with her, and some people will find those offensive. Catherine, welcome to Red Lion Pub.
Thank you.
You have some news.
Yeah, I've joined the Conservative Party.
Blimey. You've joined the Tory Party and you're the founder of the Brexit Party.
Correct.
Right, let's unpack that a bit. Why?
Because this is now about getting Brexit over the line. And
that's what the Brexit Party does. It's on the name of their party.
Correct. And
so what's the problem?
And that's what they should be doing. Because it's decided it's got other ambitions, and it's putting those ambitions before Brexit.
What are the ambitions you're thinking of?
I think a few people would like to get seats, and they are putting pressure, trying to get those seats.
In Parliament?
In Parliament. Uh-huh. I mean, obviously, Nigel stood numerous times and hasn't got elected.
Nigel Farage.
Correct. And Richard Tice, I'm sure, would like a seat, a safe seat. And so they feel that they've got leverage. Unfortunately, the problem is that at the moment, there's only one person, Boris Johnson, and his team around him who can get Brexit over the line. And it's quite clear that some of the actions that the Brexit Party have taken are hindering the process at this point and not helping it.
What's an example of that?
Well, the Brecon by-election it actually made me very angry. And I think it's made a number of other Brexiteers angry.
But isn't the case that the very fact of the Brexit Party acting as a pressure group on the Tory Party is forcing the Tory Party to deliver Brexit by October 31st?
Well, what about if they have another number of by-elections and lose all majority? How does that help anything? I mean, how does losing that one seat when you knew that the Brexit Party couldn't possibly win it, got 10%, and the other parties formed a coalition? And of course, you have Claire Fox, who's a Brexit Party MEP, saying,
communist,
very left-wing, saying, why should we step down for the Conservatives? well, why you should step down is because there was a coalition of Remain parties who managed to take the seat.
So your problem is the halving of the Brexiteer vote between the Tories and the Brexit Party
100%.
Against the Remain alliance.
Yes, and today we had Tom Watson this morning
with Joe Swinson
saying, and what we've got in Parliament,
looking for an arrangement for fighting elections.
Correct, and in Brecon we saw the weaker parties, the smaller parties, have to coalesce into the bigger parties.
So is it not time then, you think, for some kind of deal, some grand bargain between Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson?
There was. Despite what the evidence suggests, as far as my sources tell me, that there was a reach out in Brecon.
Was there?
Yes, I believe so, from the local constituency level.
Who approached who?
I don't know who approached who.
But the two were talking, the
correct,
Brexit Party and the Tories.
Correct, and there was suggestions of changing the candidate, because one of the things that's been said...
Whose candidate? Sorry,
the Conservative Party candidate. I mean, Richard Tice has come out on record and said, oh, well, they fielded the same candidate. This is ridiculous. Well, I believe that there were offers made, and they had the chance, I'm talking about the Brexit Party, to be real heroes over Brexit, over Brecon. They could have been heroes, instead everybody ended up as zeros.
And you're worried then that this vehicle, it's not even a party, is it? It's a company with subscribers, the Brexit Party.
It is quite clearly a political party. The Electoral Commission doesn't say how you have to set up a party.
No.
But it doesn't have members, no.
No. And you started it, didn't you, in November?
Yes, and it had a very specific purpose, and it did that purpose, i.e. we've changed May and got Boris.
Yes.
And I think that's fantastic. And from what I've seen of Boris so far, he needs all the help he can get. He knows that he's going to be gone, the Conservative Party goes if...
Have you told Nigel Farage this?
Yeah, I told Nigel that I'd joined the Conservative Party Monday a week ago.
When?
Monday a week ago.
And how?
I met him for 30 minutes.
And what did he say when you resigned?
He didn't say... I didn't resign because, of course, I'm not
we'll come to that in a minute. But when you said you're joining the Tory Party, what did he say?
He didn't have a reaction particularly.
He must not have been happy, because his very existence is to not be a Conservative.
Well, Nigel wasn't going to say that, was he?
You've joined the Tory Party, but of course you had been sacked from the Brexit Party, hadn't you, in March?
Well, I couldn't be sacked. I was the leader and I owned all the shares.
Or you resigned from the party you founded then?
I gave. It was a question of giving rather than them taking.
Why did you resign?
I resigned because there was a left-wing vendetta against me.
Right.
And I'm not sure where... the first one came out with The Guardian when they started writing a piece about a blog I'd written about black men. Now, my husband is black. I've been married to him for 7 years. My previous husband, who I was married to for 15 years, was brown, was a Nepalese Sherpa, and I have 2 mixed-race children. So the sort of emphasis of this was that Catherine is racist. That's the gist of it.
But you did resign over the remarks. I mean, looking at some of your tweets, which you've since deleted, which Hope Not Hate uncovered, Islam is, quotes, a non-democracy ideology that is incompatible with liberal democracy, close quotes, and of Islam it was, quotes, perfectly rational to be phobic about people who want to kill you, close quotes. Well, you're attacking an entire religion here, aren't you?
Correct, because I believe it's political ideology and I would stand by that still.
You retweeted things like one former US congressman saying, quotes, Haiti is a shithole, it's run by blacks, close quotes. And you retweeted a photograph of a multiracial primary school with a message, in quotes, this is a British school, this is white genocide, close quotes. These are not acceptable remarks in any sense.
This is the problem in Britain.
Right.
You can't say, there's self-censorship on everything. Constantly. And I mean, we have Claire Fox saying that she's free speech person, but when you want to talk about a number of subjects...
You can't defend those remarks. White genocide, looking at...
It's white replacement, that's for sure. We've got an issue with...
just talking about race in this way is appalling.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, why can't we talk... let me put it this way. If I'm in Jamaica, I can talk about race. Very openly, okay? I'm a white person and I know I'm in a black community and I behave in an appropriate way in that community. If I'm in Nepal and I send people to villages, and I run a healthcare charity. We ask people to behave in a certain way.
Yep.
Okay, so that it's appropriate culturally.
Do you stand by these messages that I've read out on Islam?
Do I stand by that
genocide?
Islam is not compatible with a Western democracy? Well, yes, I think I do, because it's a religious, theology.
So how can you be a member of the Tory party?
Well, we'll see whether they let me come in.
But they have let you come in. You show me your membership number.
Correct. And I think that one of the problems in this country, and Brexit has been about, is that the country is more socially conservative than the politicians. I think most of the politicians at the moment are Liberal Democrats. We've got 200 Conservative MPs who are effectively Liberal Democrats. They won't talk about 15 million people who weren't born in this country. They won't talk about 330,000 people coming in of any description. And this causes social problems.
Did no one at the Conservative Party look at the history, these tweets that were in The Guardian in March, hope not hate and cover them, and then not challenge you about them before you became a member?
No.
And why not?
Well, probably because they don't recognise me as important.
Well, you're significant because you're the founder of the Brexit Party.
Correct, and I'm going to carry on. I think that free speech is the biggest problem we have got in this country.
Well, Catherine Blaiklock, thank you for coming on Chopper's Brexit Podcast. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, stay with us. In just a moment, I'll be talking to Maddie Timont-Jack from the Institute for Government on whether MPs can stop a no-deal Brexit. Right after this.
Hello, Chopper listeners. My name's Danny Boyle and I'm the Telegraph's Commuter Editions editor, which means it's my job to provide you with great journalism that makes your journey to and from work as enjoyable as possible. I can't prevent train delays or guarantee you won't get caught in the rain, but I can make sure you're up to date with the best of the Telegraph every morning and evening. And I just wanted to let you know about one of the ways you can get all that in audio form. All you need to do is join my WhatsApp group. Every weekday, my colleague Chris Price and I bring you short audio briefings directly to your smartphone at 8 in the morning and 5:30 in the afternoon. And the best bit, it's completely free to sign up and easy. Just click on the link in the show notes for this episode. I look forward to having you as a group member soon.
Right, back in the Red Lion pub. It's only August, but the Brexit chatter is dominated by how Remainers can stop Brexit next month. With me now is Maddie Timont-Jack from the Institute for Government, essentially a think tank for the civil service. Maddie, welcome to the pub.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Been drinking a few times here, have you?
I have been a few times, yes. But not this early in the morning.
So we're on coffee or tea. Now, your think tank is basically a civil service-friendly think tank, as I would see it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
So I thought your report coming out this week was fascinating, really saying that we are where we are and a no-deal Brexit is going to be quite hard to stop for Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were trying to look at, is what different scenarios could play out in the autumn in Parliament. So we did also look at, how challenging it would be to get a deal through as well. But in terms of no deal, I think that the point is that because of the way that the government controls so much parliamentary time, has control of the order paper, it means it's going to be quite hard for MPs to actually sort of, for example, initiate legislation to require the government to act, which is something
to reverse the Article 50 decision.
Yeah, either to, well, they could revoke Article 50, so stop Brexit altogether. But earlier this year, they passed legislation simply requiring the government to request an extension to Article 50, which I think, given the numbers in Parliament, that would be more likely of an approach they're going to take. And I think the point of the report was just to say, actually, it's not going to be straightforward to do that again. So they passed legislation earlier this year, essentially because Theresa May was trying to get a deal through. So there were Brexit votes happening, which allowed them to take control of the order paper. Whereas in the autumn, if Boris Johnson definitely does not want to try and get a deal through, and at the moment it seems like, given he hasn't sort of started the renegotiations with the EU, it seems unlikely. So actually, they're not going to have the hook to try and take control of the order paper again. And it would basically rely on the Speaker allowing amendments to motions which normally aren't amendable. And that's sort of the
I'm on my second coffee because I was in Edinburgh just yesterday.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
I did a 9-hour return trip in a day to hear what the Speaker had to say. I knew he was speaking, thought he might have something to say about Brexit, and lo and behold, he did. He said he would do all he can to stop a no-deal Brexit, or at least a Brexit without MPs approving it.
Yeah,
and that's his point, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's what I think we can probably expect, is that, you know, doing some of the steps that could be taken. So, for example, allowing an amendment to an emergency debate motion. This is something that's been floated a bit. That would be a significant break with normal parliamentary rules and convention. But I think the Speaker would take that step if he feels like the Prime Minister is trying to get around Parliament. So if the government does try and give MPs a chance to have their say, then I think he's less likely to take that step, which is kind of why I think we have to wait and see what happens in the autumn, although all the messages coming out of Number 10 seem that is what they're going to do. They're going to try and limit MPs'
Have you seen a way for MPs to stop a no-deal Brexit?
Well, I think there are sort of three opportunities, as I see them, that they could try and take control of the order paper. So one is using emergency debate motions, which they basically apply to the Speaker for an emergency debate. Normally, those motions aren't amendable, but they could potentially amend it. The second one is, under the recent Northern Ireland Act, the government has to table a motion...
By the 4th of September?
Yeah, so the 4th of September, they have to table a report, and a motion has to be laid by the 9th of September, which basically says that Parliament has considered the report. Now, again, normally, in the Act, it says it would be a motion in neutral terms, which means it's not amendable. But, you know, if it seems that MPs their voices are being sort of ignored, then maybe a Speaker could allow an amendment. And finally, they could potentially use a no confidence motion itself and amend that no confidence motion to take control of the order paper, which wouldn't trigger the sort of no confidence process under the fixed term Parliament
None of those
Act,
things are laws, are they? I mean, we have a law to leave.
Yeah.
By March 29th, it was on the front page of the law, which was passed by 2/3 of MPs, and then that was delayed by 6 months to October 31st. But to remove that from the statute book, you need a law to be passed by Parliament, not a motion.
No, so it would be, you'd have to use those motions to take control of the order paper to then pass legislation.
To start a new law, a new revoke law.
Either revoke or requesting an extension. But again, all of that requires multiple votes. So you need to hold on to a majority of MPs to actually pass each stage. So it's definitely not straightforward. And I think, you know, it does seem like there's a majority of MPs who don't want to leave without a deal.
How long would that take?
But well, we don't know. So you can pass legislation very quickly. Earlier this year, when they passed a law requiring the government to request an extension, they did that basically in about 5 sitting days. So you can do it quickly. But you then do need to have enough time for the government to then go to the EU, ask for an extension, agree an extension, and sort of then...
But Boris Johnson won't ask for it. He simply would not go to Brussels and demand not to leave the EU.
I think this is why MPs will probably be looking to pass legislation, because if it becomes part of UK law that the government has to ask for an extension, then he will be legally required to do so.
He'll resign.
Well, he could do. I mean, that might be then his... I mean, that could be his... I don't know what he's going to do in response. And I mean, that would be up to the government to decide, or the Prime Minister to decide. I mean, the problem is also not just... I mean, even if he went to ask, obviously the EU might say either no, or they could have certain conditions that they think the UK needs to comply with that he would not be prepared to agree to. So it'd be very hard for MPs to force him to agree an extension, even if they compel him to ask for it. So I think, again, that could be a bit of a challenge.
Do you bet, Maddie?
I don't bet, and I'm
going to ask you, what are the odds on leaving on October 31st?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think MPs are going to be, you know, we've seen that there are a lot of MPs who are very unhappy with the idea of no deal. You know, even MPs who might want Brexit, they just don't want a no deal Brexit. And I think that's really important to differentiate. But it does look like it's very hard for them to sort of change the Prime Minister's mind at this stage, or at least force him to act. But then I mean, so much that's happened this year has been unexpected that I don't want to bet either way. I think all that we can do as the Institute is say, this is your challenge. But, you know, I can't predict whether or not they're going to get the numbers and whether they're going to figure out their plan.
Maddie T-Mont-Jack from the Institute for Government, thank you for coming on the podcast, and do come on again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, a question I get asked a lot is, who joins political parties? Why would you bother? Is it worth joining one? Well, the man who knows the answer to that is Timbale, Professor of Politics at Queen Mary, University of London, and author of a new book, Foot Soldiers, Political Party Membership in the 21st Century. And he's here right now in the Red Lion Pub. Timbale, welcome to Chopper's Brexit Podcast. Your first time in the Red Lion Pub?
It is, actually, yes, believe it or not. Yes, yeah.
It's a nice place. Smells a bit of beer, but otherwise fine.
It smells a bit of something, certainly. I'm not quite sure what, yeah.
Now, this book is fascinating. You've attempted to drill down into the absolute meat and drink of parties. That's the members. And you've made some... Well, the book you've got there raises some conclusions. They're odd.
Yeah, members are odd. I mean, because not that many people join political parties. I mean, we're used to the idea of there having been a big flood into political parties, but it still means that only around 1-2% of people at most ever actually get to join them. So they are, by definition, if you like, abnormal.
And we're somewhere down from the 3 million who remember the Tory parties in the 50s, of course, and Labour and the Lib Dems, although they've seen some uptick recently. I was struck by the quote from a Lib Dem activist who said that the competition for their party is not just the Tories and Labour, but Netflix. Is that the point, that normal people want to watch Netflix and go to a party meeting?
Well, I think certainly that does partly explain why we've seen, since the post-war golden age, as it were, in the 1950s, this decline in party membership. Because there's simply far more things that can capture the attention of people now than there were back then. I mean, we're used to the idea of the Young Conservatives back then being, the best dating agency in town. Who needs the Young Conservatives to find someone to date nowadays?
You swipe left or swipe right.
Swipe
the Tories will swipe right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that's right. And people talk nowadays about the attention economy, and parties have got to compete in that economy.
Is it more of a transactional relationship now, do you think, between members? They want something back for their money?
I think members probably are less deferential and more consumerist than they used to be. That's certainly true. And one of the problems that the Conservatives have, certainly compared to other parties, is they don't really give their members very much, apart from the possibility of choosing the leader, which is, of course, a very big thing. But the Conservative Party members don't really have much say on policy, at least officially, whereas at least the other parties can say, look, join us, there's a way of influencing our policy. There has been mooted before on the Tories. Jacob Rees-Mogg talked about it on this podcast, actually, at last year's party conference, and also the idea of an elected chairman was raised during the leadership hustings this summer. Yes, that's right. And I think there are some Conservatives, and we spoke to many of them, who said, they do recognise that in the 21st century, the old model of, just sort of shut up and back the leadership, isn't going to work anymore. So they are going to have to think a lot more about that. We've seen a big surge in, say, the Tory party. That's been a focus this summer. They've had a huge boom in numbers because people wanted to have a chance to choose next PM. So there is a degree of taking part. The challenge now is holding on to those numbers for the Tory party. Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why, obviously, Brexit is going to be incredibly important. I think if, you've had this surge into the party because of Brexit, maybe some of them from the Brexit Party, former members of UKIP, if Boris Johnson doesn't deliver on Brexit, there's going to be an awful lot of disappointed people. And there's a chapter actually in the book about why people leave. And generally speaking, people leave because they get disappointed with the direction the party, and particularly the leader, is taking it. Do you think MPs reflect the membership of the party? I think some of them do, but I think most MPs are aware that people who join political parties tend to have rather more kind of ideological ideas about politics than the general public, and therefore they are a little bit wary of simply following the membership. They do regard their own job as it were, being a bit of a kind of broker or a buffer between quite zealous members and quote unquote ordinary members of the public. That's right. And you talked there, didn't you, about this sort of Burkean issue of who they're looking after, the constituents or the members, and indeed how kind of cohorts or cliques of members in these. I think the Tory party has as few as 10 members in a lot of their seats, so they can dominate, can't they? Well, they certainly can, yes. I mean, parties have shrunk so much nowadays that it only takes a few people, really, to form a clique to actually change the direction of that local party. And, of course, it doesn't take many people to select the MP nowadays, which is why some people would say that even MPs are becoming rather more unrepresentative than they used to be. What do you think about this new Brexit Party idea? They're a company with subscribers, not members. They're not having any policies this autumn. They're going to have a series of rallies around the country, probably yelling the word Brexit and sovereignty and delivering on a deal. And everyone shouts back, great idea, Nigel, but no actual policies. Do you think we're moving towards a subscriber relationship, not members? I'm not so sure, actually. I think most parties recognise that they need to give their members a little bit more than that. I think, as a vehicle for Nigel Farage and, at the time we're talking about with Brexit being so important, that model can work. But I don't think long-term this is sustainable. But are you seeing, this is called Chopper's Brexit Podcast after all, are you seeing a realignment on Leave and Remain grounds, do you think? I mean, overnight we have Joe Swinson and Tom Watson talking about some kind of pact, and we saw at the Brecon by-election when the three parties got together. Are we seeing more
more of this leave v remain. Well, that's the new language of politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the case that Brexit represents a huge challenge for particularly the Labour Party, because, you know, we have this massive disjunction between what the membership want and what the leadership want on there. I think Boris Johnson, by pursuing the kind of Brexit he's pursuing, is probably actually warding off that problem for the Conservative Party. I think given the way the membership feels about Brexit, if he were to do anything else, I think the Conservative Party would be in trouble with its membership.
Do you think in 10 years' time we'll have just two big parties, Brexit v Remain?
I'm not so sure. I mean, I think we may have stopped talking about Brexit, kind of, by then.
This podcast will still be going, Tim.
Well, I'm sure it will. But in as much as Brexit, in a way, kind of represents the cutting edge of two different identities in what some people call a culture war, yeah, then maybe.
Well, Timbale, your book's out soon. It's called Foot Soldiers, Political Party Membership in the 21st Century. When is it out?
It is actually, I think, out now, so people can buy it in the shops.
Timbale, thank you for coming on Chopper's Brexit Podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the Red Line pub on your first visit.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks to my guests, Catherine Blaiklock, Professor Timbale, Roland Oliphant, and Maddie Tiemont-Jack. Thanks to the podcast producers, Pete Norton, Theo Luludis, and Elliot Lampitt. Don't forget you can get access to all of our brilliant news, comment and analysis at The Telegraph, completely free of charge for 30 days by going to telegraph.co.uk/chopper. I've been looking through my favourite Telegraph articles in recent days, and I'll be putting links to those in the show notes to this episode. If you want to get in contact, do tweet us at Brexit Broadcast or email us choppersbrexitpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do leave us a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people find this show. And always buy your copy of the Daily Telegraph. Until next time, cheerio!